Hello again. My video this week was to produce this simple earring holder. It's made from an offcut of a board of cherry that's been on the shelf for quite some time and it's been crying out for a project. This was actually requested by a viewer quite some time ago and I've been putting it off and I've finally got round to producing it. It's made in 4 separate sections and then assembled afterwards. There is a method of producing them from a single blank of wood, and I'll put a link above to a video by Mike Walt, which I highly recommend that you watch, which uses the other technique. So here's my version. I hope you'll enjoy the video, and I hope at the end you'll consider subscribing and staying with me for future videos. Thanks for watching. I've got an old board of cherry. It's an end piece. There's not much left of it. You can see it was the end, it's painted green. There's a rip down this side, but it's been on the shelf for quite some time, just waiting for a little project. Today's its day. I've marked 2 discs on the surface, one at about 4 inch and a larger one at about 5 inch, and I'm just going to cut those out with the bandsaw as near to round as I can. Being careful to make the best use that I can of the wood, take the 2 discs from this end, I'm going to want to make a stem between the piece and a finial, so they'll both come out of this end piece here. I've mounted the larger of the 2 blanks, which will be the base of the piece, on a small screw chuck. It's a homemade screw chuck, just fits on my pin jaws. I've also put a spacer in here. I keep a number of these available to pad out the depth if I don't want the screw to go all the way through. They fit on the small screw and on the large screw. I've turned to round, flattened off the base. I've actually just left this slightly dished so that the piece will sit on this edge. And I'll now mark for a mortise. My jaws. So next I'll put the mortise and then I'll sand and finish the base. I'm using a shellac sanding sealer today. First time I've used the shellac sealer on cherry. I don't know exactly how this will come out. I've sanded up now through 600 grit. And I'm just giving it a stick wax finish. It's a mix of canuba and beeswax. I'm putting quite a bit of pressure on to try and get the wax a bit more fluid and move it around, letting the friction melt that a little bit. Before reversing the base and turning that out, I'm going to turn down the stem and put a tenon on each end so that that will fit into the base and the top. Let's use a 10mm spanner, a wrench, just to judge this distance, thickness. The next part is to turn the finial. I've mounted it directly in the pin jaws this time. I'll just turn this down to round and then shape. I've read recently on an article online that there are rules about what constitutes a finial. Well, I don't know any of the rules. I just turn what pleases me at the time. Maybe one day I'll find out exactly what everything means and what should be there, but for my needs today, that'll do the job. Remounting the base in the truck, the next job is to drill a hole in the centre to take the spigot on the post that we turned. In my case this is 10mm. Just using a 10mm Forstner bit. With the post in place, I can just draw in some temporary boundaries so I know where to remove the waste wood. I'll take that out now and complete the turning. I'm starting to sand at around 240 grit. I can't always do that with my tool work, but on this project I can. Whilst I'm just waiting for the sealer to dry here, I thought I'd answer a question I'd had from a viewer recently, wanting to know what sort of sandpaper I use. Well, I use a whole mix of papers. I use these thin strips from a local supplier. Comes in either the mesh or the J-weight cloths. I use thin strips because I'd rather use a small piece and change it regularly, throw it away, rather than trying to use a bigger square and work out which bit's been used. I also actually prefer Arbanet, the mesh. Again, I cut this down into smaller pieces, only use it, just for one part of a project, then I'll dispose of it. I also have J-weight cloths in long rolls that I just keep here. This is 2-inch wide, and I just cut off whatever piece I want and use that. But generally I use small pieces rather than a large square, and change it regularly. I've mounted the top piece now, and this is the top side of it. The underside I'll remount at the end just to clean that up. So first off, 10mm hole to take the spigot. That's for the finial. A lovely finish straight off the tool there. Hardly a mark in sight, which is quite good for me. The next stage is to drill a series of holes around the outside of the upper disc that will allow the earrings to go through and be held there. So first thing, I'm going to just pick an arbitrary line, yes, about there, that is where I want to drill the holes. This jig has a simple insert. This is a 4mm insert. I have various sizes. I think up to about 12mm that will go inside here. And we'll just keep going round now. One issue I hadn't anticipated is on the back I've had some tear out where I've drilled through. Luckily I've still got the back to finish, but if I'd turned this much thinner I'd have had problems repairing the back, so I'm glad I left it a bit thicker. Right, I finally managed to make a new spigot on a waste block to hold this. Because of the shape at the back, the conical shape, it's not the most stable, but should be fine in the centre. I need to drill a 10mm hole, and then I'll bring the tailstock up to support it whilst I turn the rest of it. try just putting a bit of carpet there, just to protect it. So I'm going to sand this now and then come back to you just when we're finishing and ready to put the whole piece together. The final part now is just assembly. Fairly straightforward, obviously just gluing the spigots in place, but the one thing I want to be aware of is that on one side the grain is lighter. There's a whiter patch, which is probably the sapwood from this piece of cherry, and it appears on the top here as well, so I just want to make sure that I align those, and that will keep all the rest of the grain pattern in line as well. So I'm just using medium CA, and just little on the spigot, around the edge. If you recall, I made sure that the areas that are going to be glued remain clear of any wax or sealants. Fairly straightforward fit. I'm not worried about it being out of alignment. It's nice and straight. Again for the top piece. Don't need too much glue. And make sure this one aligns now. And just look down from overhead and just turn that to the point I'm happy with. Nice and straight. And then the finial. Right in the top. Once again, one last check for alignment. Right, happy with that. I didn't use any accelerator or anything, so I'll just leave it now and let it set up. Stripping down and cleaning a cinder overchuck is a fairly easy process, but you will ideally need the following tools: a 3mm Allen wrench, a pair of circlip or snap clip pliers, an old toothbrush, a wooden mallet or a hammer and a block of wood, a small amount of paraffin, kerosene or something to clean oil with, quantity of